lasts in game minutes.
Right,
You're
right.
like,
Because
okay,
everything it slows down to bullet time. Right.
correct. And so, well, it's time for a long rest. I'm like, no long rest. It's 10 in the morning.
Slows down to bullet time. Huh.
Correct. So one of the things that I use now, you can make your own, but I found a fantastically good resource online. Is that I will have these, at least one of them on the table.
Uh,
I have one actually glued to my DM screen. And
nice.
what this is you can actually mark off what time of the day it is, and you can even mark off the rounds of combat so that you don't have to kind of keep mental track of them.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, this is actually a free resource that you can get on the DM's Guild. I'll look up the link if you need it. But what I did is I printed it out and then I put some plastic on it so that you can use a erasable marker or a whiteboard marker and say, okay, so it is 7 a.m. when you got to the tavern. Okay, we did our travel. We rolled for random encounters, whatever it was, no random encounters. It took, according to the map, 2 hours to get there. It's 9 a.m. All right, we do our fight, whatever. They're like, oh man, I need to take a long rest. Like, no, it's barely at most 10 a.m. You can take a short rest, which jumps us over to 11 a.m. and then travel back. And now you got a random encounter on your way back. Well, you're still at midday. You're still no long rest
Here's a
time.
question. A long rest doesn't necessarily dictate sleep. Even
No, but
if it did, how
but
come
it does imply but it does imply that it is a long rest such that that your body doesn't need one unless at least a period of 18 to 24 hours has passed.
I
So
see.
at,
Okay.
so at least in fifth edition, because again, and I'm going to
No, no,
apologize,
that's fine. That's
I
what
do
I was
not, I
talking
do
about.
not know, I do not know other systems, but at
So
least
I
in
have a time block
fifth
clock,
edition,
but it is not as cool looking as yours.
which is no, it's fantastic.
It's I
And
gotta
again, I'm
fix
going
it.
to say I did not create this. This is a download from DM's Guild. It's
That is
free, by the way. So
yeah, yeah, that's wicked. Uh, yeah, that one only has time. Granted, it has time in like 3 implements. My apologies, I'm really stuffy this morning.
no worries.
But it doesn't have a round tracker. That's a cool idea.
I believe it's just easy for people to think of time as in a face of a clock, just because culturally that's what we see.
Because
But
it's
if you have it as a line, it's the same.
right, right, right.
So that is one of the first things that I actually put on the table when we start a session. Is that remember that last session where were we? And it was this time of day,
That's cool.
and that's where we're picking up. And the reason I do that is exactly because of the rest. I do also keep track of my characters or my players' characters' birthdays
Oh, that's cool.
because I have. Yep, it does. One of the things that you have about your character is their age. And now, even though I have never had to enforce well, you're getting too old for this, there's going to be a penalty for your age or otherwise, I do keep track of when they're born so that around that time of the year,
Uh-huh.
they can have something special happen. So, for example, the only time that this has happened so far, we have birthday,
Mhm.
is that their patron god actually gave them a boon for the whole day.
Oh wow.
So I thought that was, something in keeping with that sort of thing. Now, this is the calendar I keep.
Yeah.
Again, I do have this as a handout for my players, and so that they can also know what the campaign is. I make their note taking a lot easier.
Note taking is good, particularly if it's not a pain in the ass. I'm like, good for you.
For sure.
Oh,
And now this is a free resource that you can get. This was at www.natural20.co.uk, and you can
okay.
download this. This is a calendar of Haptos. That calendar of Haptos is the default calendar for the Forgotten Realms.
Okay. I did not know
So
that.
again, D
Cool.
and D, D and D,
I Forgotten Realms is
and
fine.
it does make it easy.
I was just talking to S. John Ross. He works. Oh God, he works at lots of places. TSR, White Wolf, Avalon Hill, Wizards of the Coast, West End Games, Flying Buffalo. That list goes stupid long. I found an article by him where he was talking about previous how the Forgotten Realms in particular has changed a lot from edition to edition, mostly for the better, at least from the whole bigotry racism side of things. Um, but mechanically he was very disappointed in some of the more meaty, crunchy, rulesy changes over time. And his brain is just, oh man. Anyway, yeah, Forgotten Realms. I'm vaguely familiar with Forgotten Realms. As in, I think it's actually called Faerun, and I know nothing about the calendar. So that was cool.
I Well, here's the thing, and this is just me nerding out on the one thing I'm an expert in. The continent is Faerun, but the world is Toril.
Oh,
So,
look at you being all specific. So on
yeah,
the
well,
subject of
at least
handout,
the one you're playing.
yeah, right. So I can do that with Spider-Man. On the subject of handouts, I'm actually not a fan. I'm just there. I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm not a fan. So as,
Really?
yeah, so
Why?
as a player, handouts do for me the same thing that slow down time does in a video game. It makes things worse for me. In my experience, I'm
Okay.
the only person ever who thinks that slow down time in a video game makes things harder on them. Doesn't matter. Assassin's Creed Origins, Max Payne, I think it's Jack and Daxter 3. You get the ability to like, oh, sorry, Sly Cooper 1, wrong game. It's slow. They all slow down time. Sly slows everybody down, including you, which so you're all moving at the same speed again. It's just a slower speed. That makes no sense. Anyway, slow down time makes things harder for me, not easier. My accuracy is going to go down, not up. And
Hmm.
because it messes with my understanding of the game at this moment. So up until this point, I've trained my brain to play a specific way at a specific frame rate, at a specific internal clock speed,
Right.
like, and then you change it on me. It's like when the car starts to go faster, you lose you have to compensate for it. And
Right.
that's true for everybody. But in theory, if you slowed the car down, your brain would work better because you'd have more time. But for me, that's not true. like, uh, and handouts do the same thing. I like the psychological line between me and my player character, which is I'm totally okay with you handing me a physical puzzle to solve because we didn't blur the
Gotcha.
line.
I gotcha. I see what you mean.
We didn't blur the line at all. We made a hinge in an otherwise black line. We opened it. You handed me the physical puzzle. I solved it or I didn't, and I handed it back to you. We shut the line again. That's it. When you do a handout, you're blurring it, and my brain doesn't. It pops my immersion instead of making it better. As a player, that bothers me.
Okay.
I don't want to suffer from that. Though as a separate thought, I love when hosts spend the energy to make them, but I would rather you spent that energy, I don't know, playing with a backstory or something instead. I'll
So
take
what?
an encounter out of the depths of your brain over a handout any day.
Okay. Okay. But then, how about those handouts or those props? Because we're going to have to go into general props as
I
well
can do
that
props.
make certain things easier. So, for example, and this is something that my players have loved. My players are dirt poor all the time because otherwise they'd be just buying. They'd just be buying armor all the time. It's just like, oh yeah, well I'll buy a new sword. And like they would be a lot more careless. So my players, I keep them dirt, dirt
Dirt
poor.
poor. Right, right, right.
So one way that they can make money is that every tavern they go to, there's always someone gambling, always. So I have a couple of gambling games, and I have a couple of little mini
Nice.
games that could also be a little different thing. But it is very hard to say, okay, I bet this much money, and then you go back to your player character sheet, and then just cross off how much money you put on that one and that one. So what I tell them to do is, okay, how much money are you going to be gambling this afternoon or this
Right, right.
session in the time? Well, I'm going to be gambling, I don't know, 50 gold pieces, and I'm going to be gambling, I don't know, 60 gold pieces, and I'm going to be gambling 100 gold pieces. So one thing that I did was I went to a party supply store and
Mhm.
got a whole bunch of gold pieces.
Oh, cool.
So what I do is I tell them like, okay, mark off your character sheet those 50 gold pieces as if you had already lost them. They're not there. I
Okay.
give them 50 gold pieces, and then they physically have it that they're able to manipulate. Like, okay, I put this much down, and then at the end of the session, count how many you have left and write that back down onto your sheet.
See, for me,
So
that's different than like a sheet of paper that's a map or a sheet of paper that's a guy's business card, something like that. That what you're talking about now is you're not talking strictly about and he gives you something and it looks like this. That's not really what you're talking about. You're talking about a utilitarian prop now. which I'm a big fan. Big fan. I would love to do a Q&A on games. There's some like little micro games within your table. Love those.
Put it up there because I do think it's one of the hardest things to find, a functionally well balanced mini game that you can just drop into your session.
Oh yeah. So like I have a player who one of my favorite classes in the system. One of the systems I love is the gambler class. And
I'm not familiar. What system is it, by the way?
That is ICRPG. And let me get you the gambler class's benefits. I got the book here next to me. Hold on. I always have.
Now, while you look that up, one of the things that I really liked that they did, when again, I know that you're not a big Wizards of the Coast fan, is that they actually published Three Dragon Ante. Three Dragon Ante is the card game that is supposedly being played when you go gamble at a tavern. And of course, I bought myself a copy of it.
I'm vaguely familiar with it. I have not played it yet. I think I have a copy of that laying around here somewhere. Who is it? Is it good?
I don't recognize the book.
That's ICRPG Worlds. So the gambler class has a couple of different benefits and set him apart from the other classes, just like every other class. He deals his damage with a deck of cards. When you fire your gun, draw a card for damage. If you got a nat 20, which is what they call ultimate, you draw 2 cards instead. You count up the math, that's how much damage you do. Bad bet if you draw. If it's a red card, you heal that much. If it's a black, you take that much.
Okay.
And lucky, replace any attempt or check whenever you want as a player. If you're going to make an attempt or a check and you say, you know what, I want to draw instead, done. I draw a card, you draw a card. The high card wins, period. If you draw an ace, critical success independent of what I drew as a host. If you draw an ace and I draw an ace, you still win. A couple of friends of mine like to laugh about how the gambler class is ironically named because a deck of cards is inherently less
random
than a single die roll. Right. but anyway, for that,
especially if you're like me and I dabble into close-up magic in the real world, so I do card tricks and sleights of hand. Yeah. So
right, because
you do not want, like, oh, you're gonna give me the chance to deal from my deck to see what my results are. Are you sure? Okay, sure, let's do that.
Yeah, right. So I got them, and ICRPG has a unique art style that my players tend to go for. So I got them like a deck of cards with the art style.
Oh, nice. Okay. But in that sense, that is, that's not really a handout because it's not something that the player gets to keep. Although it's a prop that you use, just like the golden coins. It's something that you, the DM, keep in the end.
Yeah, I like props, but I'm not a big fan of handouts. I do like the energy it takes to make them. I think that's very endearing and very sweet. And if your host that does that, they probably want to be there. They're probably putting energy in.
Sure,
and that's important. But they could just as easily spend that energy somewhere else on a really interesting NPC, on a unique encounter that you're never going to see at any other table ever. That sort of thing.
Absolutely true. But now here's my take on exactly what you're saying is that as a DM or as a GM, as a game master of any game, this is a full-time hobby for you, whereas for your players, it's a part-time hobby.
Yes.
They generally, unless they also DM somewhere else, but generally they only come to play and they only do anything, regardless of how much time they spend thinking about the game, which could be eternal.
The whole time.
But they only do something during game time, during the day that they go play. Whereas you as a GM, at least in my case, I track the hours of how long I dedicate for D&D in my case. Yeah. I believe my bosses at my normal job would say, well, how do you fit all that time in? Do you just not sleep? And the short answer is sometimes I actually just don't sleep. But here's the thing. You enjoy the things you make. Now, here's one thing that I've been very successful with handouts that I make, that instead of going into just the encounters, I actually give my players the magical items that they find. So that means that I have to have them. Right. So these are some things that I give them. So part of the time that I spend is, for example, if they actually find an immovable rod, I have a little business card size item card that I made with the rules of the immovable rod on the back, and I made and printed this, and I will hand this to them, and they will be able to keep this. And if something happens to their removal rod, they lose it, they just give it back to me. See what I mean? So that isn't.
If you handed that to me as a player, I would, and like I saw you take it out of the book like you just did, I would love the amount of efforts that you put into that, and I would hate that you gave it to me.
I don't get why. Now in this case, it's not an actual. I mean, I'm not giving you a physical prop like, oh, this is your,
But
I'd love to, but
you're giving me another thing to keep track of. That's bookkeeping, and I like it.
Well, here's the thing. You would have to write down your character sheet anyway.
Oh, see, now we're talking an additional layer of bookkeeping. If you gave me a card, why do I have to write it on my character sheet? I would, in my brain,
you don't.
An extension of the character sheet.
You absolutely don't. If I'm giving you the card, that means that, well, you don't need to write it on your character sheet. You have the card. It's implied that you have it. Whereas if I just told you you found you found this rod,
write it down.
You have to keep
writing
track of it.
for me, but you've also made me keep track of an additional sheet of paper. If I'm a player, if I'm chosen to be a player, I'm being a player because I enjoy doing less work. That's actually not true. I hate being a player. But if I'm going to be a player, I've signed up to do, like you said, basically nothing in comparison to what the host does. And I do not want you to give me more work. I don't care if it's an extra die roll. Like, I don't care I would have the same reaction if you handed me a D20 that was the size of my fist as some sort of gag or present. I'm going to love that you bothered to find it and care about it and all that. And I'm going to be really irritated that you made me take it home because I'm going to lose track of it. And
well, here's the thing. I also give them, so to my players I pamper my players way too much. And that is one of the reasons that I've been a successful GM and that people want to act, people talk about, this is me, there's no way to do this it doesn't sound like I'm bragging, so I'm just going to have to take it.
It's okay.
So I've had people that are friends of my friends, people I don't know, come and say, hey, you host D&D, like, dude, I've heard so much that you're great. Would you play with my friends? Like, would you do that for me? And the first question I say is, who are you and how did you get my info? Where did this come from?
Yeah, like, who are, do I know you? And they're like, no, but you know so-and-so. And I was like, oh, all right.
Oh, okay. Exactly right. And one of the things that I do is that for my players, I will make it easy for them to keep track of all their information. So I don't know if it's going to count a handout, but let me just get it, because fortunately we're here at my basement, which means I have everything handy. But let me see if I have an example of one that I keep, because I just undid one. Yeah, here we go.
Do you know that your gaming chair kind of looks like a cow?
Yes, and now here's the thing. My chair was bought by my wife because she started working it from home.
Okay.
I needed one of those comfortable chairs, and I see that all those gamers have comfortable chairs. She bought it and she hated it, so I kept it.
So your chair, I see.
It is now my chair. So all my players will get one of these. Okay. These are super cheap. You can buy them at any Office Max or otherwise. And in it, I will put in a transparent page keeper, right. Yep. A sleeve. I will, and this is something that I take a little bit of pride in, I will custom make their character sheet with their image, with their preferred image. So if they tell me I'm going to play a Ranger of Us, I actually tell them, hey, give me the image you want. You can download it from the internet or otherwise. I have, by the way, this is something that I have never been paid for DMing, so I'm not breaking any rules in that sense. If anyone's watching this, keep in mind that you cannot profit from images that are not yours. Keep that in mind.
Right, not okay, right.
Yeah, totally not okay. So I'm doing this for just my friends, which is kind of what we're doing.
That is very cool. I don't make it. I do whenever I start with a new player, they get a sleeve like the one you're talking about, probably a binder to go with it of some kind, and one of those 300-page single like college rule notebooks from Walmart for an adult.
I just put some perforated pages, like if it were a notebook, into this, about 3 or 4. It doesn't have to be more than that. And I shared with you this one last time that we were together. I did make this one. This is a cheat sheet of what you can do. Yes. Yep. And so they will get all of that, and they will also get a page to hold that's business card size holders for the items.
See,
I'm gonna
that's
give
really
them as we
cool.
go.
I had what you're essentially talking about is a kit. If I had a kit to
Yeah.
hold all my stuff, and you had already planned ahead for like business card holders, I would probably like that a lot better. Because my one big wrinkle and my two big wrinkles as a player when I get handed a handout, something that you are not going to take back at the end of the session, whether it's a visual clue, a symbol we're supposed to get. Like one of my friends did a business card. We encountered this NPC. He's a brewer, I think. He was really funny. I just remember what his job was. I want to say he was a brewer. And he handed us his business card and on like a bright yellow index card. Tom had gone out of his way to make it all filigree and pretty, and I know he doesn't write that well. I've seen his normal writing, right? That was very impressive. That took a lot of energy out of him, and I loved that. But now I'm busy paying attention to how much energy I think Tom put into it, not the world, not this NPC, which means I have completely shattered my immersion by caring about my host in the moment.
Gotcha. Okay, I see.
While the
your
handout
point.
sleeve helps alleviate the, this feels like bookkeeping even for a second. And that does help. It doesn't alleviate the first problem. If Tom had made a badass, unique encounter, which he did, we fought an elemental, like an elemental made out of booze. That was hilarious. I'm gonna remember that forever. Like I loved it.
I'm gonna need the stat blocks for that thing because we're gonna have to put that in.
Why on earth? Dude, don't spend any energy on your business card. Come up with another elemental. That was great. And there's a period where I've got my paladin shield up like this, and it attempts to just like fill me up and make me drunk. I passed my con save because that's totally how that works.
Sure.
And I killed it. But I'm gonna remember that for ever.
Clearly.
And this card, I already forgot how it looked like. It had filigree, and I know it wasn't a bright yellow, like electric yellow index card. But what it said on it.
Here's my question to you. You GM
yeah.
More than you play, if am I correct?
Preferably, yes.
Okay. Now, you do several things that are not just the handouts and not just the encounters, not just the world. You do other things that go along with being a GM.
Yeah.
No one thing, in my particular point of view, no one thing is more urgent or important than the other. So I can't be in designing encounter mode all day long or all the time. I think sometimes I'm like, this is a cool idea, and then my brain runs with it, and and that turns out into having time to create a handout. So even if I wanted to, if I would force myself to only do encounter prep and do encounter setup and that sort of thing, then I would find a lot less enjoyment as a GM because I'm not running with wherever my enjoyment takes me of the game.
I see.
I'm forcing myself to do the one thing. So in your case, for example, you as a player, you particularly would have more appreciation for the encounter design, for all that sort of thing, and less appreciation for the handouts.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that the GM doesn't get satisfaction out of the time he puts into the handouts, even if they look terrible, by the way, because this one you were mentioning seemingly looked awesome, and you'll notice by mine that I put a lot of time into mine. Actually, as part of this is just something that is going to help you with the whole inventory thing.
Right.
People were having trouble keeping them, like, how are they carrying these amounts of money? I don't want to start giving them back to holding or otherwise. Well, guess what? One of the evil factions in my game decided to, for the first time ever in that universe, create fiat money.
That's great.
They started creating fiat money.
Nice.
And so I made them the size of the same as so they can keep them.
Yeah.
So okay, here's 100 gold.
See, that's cool. I like that. And as soon as you handed it to me, I would be like, wow, that's really cool. Franco's badass. Immersion's gone. Like,
I don't know.
But I still love that you love it, right? And Tom put a ton of effort into that. When we started that campaign, everybody got a book, everybody got a binder, everybody got a character sheet. We all, spent 20 minutes making our characters. Tom thought I would take longer. I've never played 5e. I finished my character in 5 minutes because I knew what I wanted to play when I came to the table. And then I rolled not well for that, and I chose to do it anyway because I don't give a flying crap what the die says. But anyway, we sit down and we talk, and he tells us where we're starting, right? And he hands us each an index card with a homemade magic item for our characters on it.
Cool.
The items themselves were badass. I could see as they got handed out, and a couple of the players deliberately like, Tom's like, "You want to tell everybody what you got?" Nope. Right? And I was really curious to see what they got because I loved what I got, and I could see how Tom didn't just hear me say I want to play a paladin. He knows who I am, and then I said I want to play a paladin. So he made paladin specific gear that feels very me, as opposed to very, say, Lancelot, who was a paladin I do not agree with. So like if he had it was gear very much for me, and I really loved that. But now I don't care about the handout. I care about the give a shit Tom put in. And that while that was wonderful, and I'll remember that Tom put in that effort, I already forgot what the item does. And I didn't really like carrying the item card around with me. Like, I'm a player. I want to do exactly this much work. That's the point of being a player. But I'm fussy like that. I find the players usually love handouts. They go nuts for it. So like I have.
And again, that's one of the things that I'm famous for is my handouts, which is kind of why I kind of brought up this topic. Is that how does everyone else do it?
Right.
And in your case,
I don't.
That's what I'm saying. Can I assume that it's right to say that you don't? You just don't.
I do props like these. This is the closest I get to a handout. The players, this and the occasional old map. So the Golden Sky Stories is a tabletop game that has no violence in it. None. Yeah. Weird, right?
Okay.
So they have
me intrigued.
They have these things. Well, I guess technically not none. There's 3 paragraphs of text that goes down like a third of a page because the way it's formatted. Mm-hmm. And the first 2.5 of those paragraphs are combat is bad, don't do it, bad idea, don't go hitting people you don't know, don't go hitting people you do know. If you must, here is one line for how that rule works, and then everybody gets punished who is involved, regardless of who won or lost. Like, combat's bad. Like,
I have to ask, what is the theme that
Golden
of
Sky
the adventures?
Is the idea is that you play animals who can pose as people temporarily. Like you play spirit animals who can shapeshift into humans. And you live in like little rural Japan or whatever little rural country you want. Sure. And you solve everyday problems. Best friend A and best friend B had a fight and now they're arguing and you have the opportunity to help them smooth it over. They'll probably do it themselves in a couple of weeks because they're best friends. But you can help them fix that today. The sense of scale on Golden Sky Stories is so incredibly small compared to something like 5e. It's a little tiny, heartwarming, wonderful little system. It's wonderful.
Nice.
Where everybody plays an NPC and a farmer, and there's supplements where you can play like a gelatinous cube who's decided to fit in with the other life forms because heroes and kings go off for adventure, but in their wake, life goes on, and people fight, and life is hard. And even the monsters are like, you know what? If I shapeshift so I look like a human, so I can actually communicate, I'm not tricking the humans. They know I'm actually a gelatinous cube. I just can't communicate if I don't look like a person with a mouthful. Once I do that, now we can just spend time together and, armor up together. Why would I live in the deep, dark hole in the ground when I could live next to the warm fire with Phil? And in exchange for that, I'm not going to eat.
That is a valid question.
Right. Why on earth would I live in the dark, wet hole when I could live here? Because
it wasn't a dark, wet hole. It was a hobbit hole with all the comforts of. No, I'm just kidding.
Stories, you get tokens from your fellow players, like metacurrency. The idea is when you're doing something really cool or very sweet or very helpful or whatever, your other players can give you dreams. They're like tokens that you use to later on increase your connection with other people, which mechanically makes your life easier and harder. They're the meat of the mechanic. They're the mechanical pulp of the game. And I bought a deck of dreams. When a player gives you one of these, I never give you one of these. Only other players do that. So each one just has the deck of dreams on the back. That's the back of the card. They all look the same. And on the front, they're like, this one says good job, and this one says you're delightful, and this one says you just made my day. The front of them doesn't really matter. The point is that it's a dream point, and I put
Sure.
that on the table. And whenever players want to give one to somebody, they just, you know.
Cool.
And then in theory, the player holds on to that until they spend the point. And players, in my experience, love that kind of thing. I just don't. I'm totally in the minority there. Um,
You are.
you
No,
really
but again,
but it's
that's
definitely
not.
me. Like,
Now, here's the thing. If I were GMing for you,
uh,
which I hope one of these days we'll get the chance to do that. But if I
okay,
were GMing for you, then I would know that, okay, then I know that this particular player, to keep him engaged, avoid the handouts, because
right.
otherwise he's
Everybody
going to
else
drop
has
out. He's going to completely drop out of the thing.
for a minute. Yeah, I'm gonna, because if the handout, it's weird. You really can't win. So if the handout looks awful, I'm gonna go ugh. And but I'm gonna love that you bothered to make it anyway. And if the handout looks great,
So
fine,
what?
I'm gonna revel in
So what
that.
do you?
Huh.
So this is a kind of similar. So what do you think about actual maps that you
Okay.
use for
So
play?
so maps. Can you be a tiny bit more specific? Are we talking a town map, a world map, a galaxy map?
I can be very more specific because
Excellent.
again, I totally overdo things, and you'll notice that that is a theme with me in my games. So let me go. I'm going to leave you
Overdoing
with some
is
blank
good.
streams.
We call that effort. I'm a big.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. My wife would oppose. Welcome to the unfinished part of my house with all my overdoing supplies. But when I say maps, I mean maps.
Nice.
So
Okay.
again, I'm going to say this for your audience. What I'm going to show you is things that I have made out of images that I don't own, particularly because they are maps of Faerun and otherwise, and I do not own any of those things. And I'm not a cartographer. I did not draw these things. However, I did spend copious amounts of time making them to what I would say, in my point of view, is awesome, so
Okay.
that my players would enjoy them. So it's going to take a moment to set up because I'm going to have to point the camera.
That's okay. So in case everybody's wondering how come Franco's up and moving when he usually isn't, he put the chat in his phone this time because he had plans like this. Wow, look at you. Something fell out of your map.
More maps. So
Okay. More maps.
So this is the first game I was running, the first time I DM'd,
Uh-huh.
was the adventure that comes in the starter set for D&D 5e, which is The Lost Mines of Phandelver,
Yeah.
and it comes with a map.
Okay.
Now I found some other map online. This was made in a system called Incarnate, which by the way I highly recommend. But I printed it, and you'll see the backside. It is several sheets of paper from a printer.
Yeah, I figured.
Printed it, cut it out, and then I laminated it with tape, with literal
Yeah, I thought it was
tape.
awfully shiny. I was like, you either you had one of those big fancy lamination machines, or that's
Nope. That's a lot of tape. And so this lays flat on the table that we're playing, and it is a hex map that will show you that you. So this is not a handout. This is something I keep in the end, but it is something that you no longer are imagining. This is the map of the world you're playing in. Whereas something that I could have a handout for is, and again, I put this in on the table because it's big and easy to find, the map of the town of Phandelver.
See,
Phandelver.
as a player, I would kind of be irritated if you put the first one on the table because I like the imagination angle. I like my brain getting to tell me what shade of green the trees are. And if you put the map in front of me that tells me what shade of green the trees are, I can't do that anymore. But the town map I really like. I'm a big fan of town maps, mostly for the distance. So if you produce a town map and it doesn't have some indicator of scale, it's not helpful for me. So I want to know. I know what my movement speed is. I want to know if I'm in the tavern and jam jars. One of my fellow characters with enormous bottle glasses. Jam jars has gone off to go to the local library because we're going to get all cliche, and he's going to go look for a specific book in the forbidden section because apparently Jam Jars is now Harry Potter. And when we came here, we did a once over in the town because you ever have your players show up to a town and some of them break off to the tavern and some of them break off to not go to the tavern and they figure out what they're doing. I hate doing that. I'm going to page through the town once, assuming that's something I can reasonably do. If the city is humongous, You can't pace through New York once, for example, before you decide what you're going to do. It's too big. But if the town is 14 buildings, I'm
Yeah.
going to visually count them all before I do anything. But because what if somebody says I'm going to the tavern and there's actually 4 of them? Well, shit. Like now I might never see him again. And I know the host now has to scramble, and that ain't fair. So I'm gonna find like, okay, that building looks like, I mean, the giant sign outside of the picture of a book. That's probably the Arcane Library. And the inns, okay, that's 4 streets away. And the sense of scale in a town makes me feel more informed when I make decisions. Because if the party is going to split A and B in 2 groups, and the end locations of those 2 groups, and we don't really know, right? Because shenanigans happen. But if the starting points are the tavern and the Great Library, and they're across the street, I feel much safer and informed as a player deciding to split the party than if they're 4 blocks away. Because if you get in a fight in the Great Library, I'm not going to hear that. I have no idea,
Right.
right? And I feel a lot less comfortable. I still want to do what I want to do, but I'm a for the group kind of guy. So if the whole group wants to fight this goblin and I don't, we're probably going to fight the goblin. Like, and that's fine.
Right.
But
A
the
little bit of
ground
play
map
compromise.
I really like. If I make a map, so I do a lot of relationship maps, how this NPC connects to that NPC, how this
Okay.
NPC connects to that player character, that sort of thing. I almost never, I mean, you can't hand those to the player. That's where all the mysteries are, right? But I have a bunch of them.
True.
When I make a world map or terrain map, or whether it's the dungeon or the world or the galaxy or whatever, if it's going to be, if I'm going to do that, I like to make them look really old. So I'll take a sheet of paper, I'll crumple it up, I'll uncrumple it, I'll recrumple it. I'll do that like 4 times.
Yeah.
And I'll bury it in the ground outside for a few days. Dig it back up, flay it flat on a table, cut off the edges, take a lighter and burn holes in it. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot with a very important detail. First, you make the map, then you crumple it up and unfold it, and you do that like 4 times. Seriously, throw a paper map in the ground outside your house.
Okay.
4 days.
How the hell can you say that as a player, I'm not going to notice the time and effort that you put into that old looking map?
You will. That's the problem for me as a player. I'll be so busy looking at that my immersion is gone.
But you do that for your players.
Because they love it, and we have different expectations. I'm one of those weird guys that does not want as a player what I want from a player. Like it's a weird thing. In my experience, lots of people, this advice gets thrown around a lot. As a host, be the kind of host you want as a player. No, see, like no. Because if I'm the kind of host I want as a player, a lot of my friends aren't going to have any fun because we want 2 very different things.
True.
If it were up, and that manifests all the time when players, like one of my friends, he wants to play Power Fantasy 5e. He doesn't really want death to be on the table, and he doesn't really want to fight for any victories, and that's okay. He doesn't have to. It's not reality. You don't have to compromise. It's the table.
It is a game.
Right. But as a player, I don't want that, and as a host, I don't want to host for that. I'm a big fan of dark, edgy. If you roll a 1, you might lose your hand. Right, that kind of thing. And as a player, I want a certain degree of that. I want to know that if I roll a 20, it's going to hurt. And if I roll a 1, it's going to hurt. And I like that sense of balance. Like I have a couple of friends. Right now I'm hosting a table where we are considering, we're kind of playtesting. So we're doing it. I just don't know if we're keeping it. We have the natural 20. We don't have the natural 1. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Well,
I hate it so much.
You know that that's actually baked into the rules of 5e. You only get a critical hit, but there's no critical fails.
Right, which is super weird, and I don't like it. I don't like it. That sense of mechanical balance on either side of the die matters to me a lot for some reason. I really don't know why. So when you lop off,
most people home rule a critical fail anyway, which I do, by the way, because my players, even though they're first-time players, most of them, they've heard about critical fails, and they've seen the memes and the ones and those. They're like, oh, well, so when I roll a 1, something bad happens. And I did not have the heart to tell them, no, you're fine. You know what I mean?
Another way to say that is, I saw what the players want in their eyes, and I gave it to them. Good for you.
For sure. No, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. But just rules as written, there's no critical fails in 5e, just so you know.
Huh. I don't own a 5e book. I've read a couple. My friend Tom that I mentioned before is a big 5e fan. He has like every book, and I'm at his house once a week, at least.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I just realized
Now,
that in front of each of those books is a disclaimer about this big on the inside credits cover. Have you read those? Those are hilarious. Those are
I have
funny.
not. I have not taken the time to read those little
Next time
disclaimers.
you're in front of your 5e books, find the inside, the credits right there in the beginning where it has like
You have made me curious.
the day they were printed and all that. And there's a disclaimer in there in italics somewhere towards the bottom of the page in every one of them, not just the players. And they are funny as hell.
Oh, here it is. Disclaimer. Wizards of the Coast is not responsible for the consequences of splitting up the party, sticking appendages in the mouth of leering green devil face, accepting dinner invitations from bugbears, storming the feast hall of giants, angling dragons of any variety, or saying when the DM asks, "Are you really sure?" I'd never seen that. I didn't know they were there.
One in every
cool.
And they're all different and they're hilarious. The one about mind flayers was particularly funny. I think that was the one.
I don't have that many, but yeah. The one I just read was the Player's Handbook, because I was pretty sure if they were in any, they're going to be in the core rule books. But I'll have to check the other ones out at some other time. Keep in mind that one of these days I'm going to have to do a little Q&A or a little chat about Easter eggs, and that's going to be be a little good one.
So like my favorite setting, I'm kind of fussy about pre-published settings.
I've noticed.
But I just got Urcia for my birthday. I'm 32 now. Wow, I'm old.
You're younger than me. Okay.
Apparently. I did not know.
Well, I mean, I'm turning 36 on August 10th, so in less than a month.
I see. Well, happy pre-birthday, because I'm sure I'm going to forget. In that book came, this is the book sleeve. This is the book jacket on the outside. And this is the map of Urcia, which is also inside the book. And I like this, and I'm not sure as if my GM handed it to me if I would be thrilled about that or not. If I've grown up on, say, Lauk my entire life, which is this island right here, it is all of these, because it's a collection of islands, everybody has a navy. The probable likelihood that you have sailed at some point in your life is high. But it's also, I mean, if you just became level 1, you were an NPC prior to that moment. It's also entirely possible that you didn't. So I would much rather my host gave me some block of text that's exposition, preferably not super long. I'm working on concise verbiage. It's something I'm not naturally good at because I like to talk. But I would much rather my host provided a verbal exposition-y detailed section on what some of the neighboring islands were like, rather than hand me this map. Because if I'm not already a sailor, if I'm not really in a position to care about the entire scope of the world, and I imagine the average sailor hasn't been from here all the way to here, just like out here in reality land, the average sailor from America hasn't been to the other end of the globe. He's been on specific missions. If they took him to the other end of the globe, they did not take him other places. The average sailor doesn't just sail all over the planet because they feel like it. They have specific harbors that they know and specific people that they know and specific things that they have to do. You can be in the U.S. Navy for a long time and not see a surprising amount of the planet. And while in America, we are particularly fussy about having globes and maps and stuff that are often outdated by the time you buy it, because governments change names and functions and leaders all the time.
Especially in islands, by the way.
Right. While a map is cool and all, I have a globe around here somewhere. It offers me almost no practical use. It's a curio that lives in my house. I don't use it to plan my day. I don't use it to plan my adventures. And I'm willing to bet that if I was a sailor, I wouldn't do it then either. I would have something more specific to the task. Maybe it's just me. But yeah, handouts tend to pop immersion for me, not make it better. And that's what they're for. So I don't.
You bring up one that I think that you might change you on that.
Oh yeah.
How about handouts that do have an in-game function.
You mean
For
like
example,
cards that you use instead of dice?
no, but okay. Let me rephrase that. That have an in-story function.
Okay.
And also adjacent. So, for example, I was taking your example of we're doing a sailing campaign, and sailors are going from one island to another or otherwise. What if this is probably not part of the mechanics of the game that you're talking about, but what if, as a GM, I made a sextant that is an actual, I can make it out of cardboard or otherwise, and that you have to operate it, and wherever you landed on, that's how we sailed, instead of rolling dice randomly. Like, oh, you know what? It turns out that you didn't read that correctly. Now we're off somewhere else, and that
See, I would love that.
Mechanically affect the game.
I would love that. Assuming that you took the sextant back after the end of when play was
right. Well, yes, of course, because it's just like the maps. I have to roll this up and take them back home.
I see. Okay, then yeah, I would love that. I have friends that would. Now this is weird. I have players at my table that would not. They would hate that, because I have a couple of players that do not like it when you blur the line between player and player character. These are the same players that want to roll to avoid traps and roll to solve a puzzle and roll to solve a riddle, as opposed to me handing them. I would never actually use a Rubik's Cube, but a Rubik's Cube as an example. Or here's a logic puzzle, here's a match game. We're not rolling, you're doing it with your hands. Because when you hand me the sextant and say you decipher, you use the sextant, what you're really saying is I'm going to use it, not Billy Dean the Paladin Warrior. I did not have Billy Dean, but that's a great idea. Like I'm picturing a relatively redneck paladin, shield and like straw sticking out of the mouth. He says "yump to," right? So I'm all for that. I think that traps, if you're going to have traps and riddles if you're going to have riddles and puzzles be solved by dice, why use them then? Give them something to hit instead, or a social thing to talk about. But with the sextant, in this case, you're asking me to use it, not my character, and I think that's wonderful. But I have players that do not think that's wonderful, and I would love that, and I would never give it to them. I would enjoy making it probably, and I would never give it to them, because I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. Every player, no matter what side of the table you're on, has specific interests. Like my Monday table, everybody there likes metacurrency except Alex. They don't love metacurrency. He hates it. They kind of like it and it's fun. But removing it from their experience will not damage their experience. Including it in the experience will damage his experience. So I don't use it at all on Monday's table. They don't really notice the loss, because there's enough other stuff going on, and it makes it. So I always think that the advice that be the host your players want, sure, on mindset, right? Like be the host that you want. Okay, sure. On ideology and mindset, sure. But that's because the host, I think that works because the host that I want is the host that listens and tailors every little thing to every player at the table. And if there's 6 of you and they all have different wants, one of those answers may be we are not compatible. Like my friend who wants the Power Fantasy 5e table. We just shouldn't play together. Not because I don't like him. I like him. He's a cool guy. I'd have lunch anytime. But if he is having a blast at my table, I am not. That means that there's a bunch of other people who live in the same town he does. He would have to travel less far than he does to my house to have the table he wants. We shouldn't play together. He should play over there. And he does. And he has a great time. And our friendship's better for it. And initially, he didn't get that because he's much younger than I am. And he was like, wait a second. You're saying you don't like me? No. I'm saying that the table you want is not the table I want. It's like if you have thoughts for somebody and they go, sorry, I don't see you that way. Nobody's fault. Just the way it is.
No, it's a different. Here's the thing. I do believe that play style is actually a different game. Because think of it like house rules for anything. If you're playing, I'm going to use a sports example. If you're playing soccer by the rules, then you're not playing like you play when you're with your buddies in the park.
Right.
You're not actually. So even though we're calling it the same, we're calling it soccer. In this case, we're calling it Dungeons and Dragons. It is actually a different game with different rules.
Yeah.
And you don't want to play professional soccer. You want to play the way you play with your friends. Whereas there are some people saying, like, no, I want to play the professional version. That's fine. Okay. They're both called soccer, but they're not the same game.
They're really not the same game. So, like, for a long time, I was a big Magic the Gathering fan. And if you play in tournament play, you've got to change your deck like every 2 years. And there's specific cards you can just never have again because they're banned, or only one because they're restricted or whatever. But in the kitchen at the kitchen table with your friends, totally play the card that's 10 years old. Play an unhinged card, right? And that game is now so completely different from the one at Wizards of the Coast upcoming tournament that you are practically playing two different games. They just play similar.
Exactly my point.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that a lot of the time when I'll find that on Facebook a lot. I have a player who wants and I don't really want to do that. How do I get him to see it my way? You don't. You talk about it. You decide whether or not compromising on either end. Maybe you shut up and give up instead. If that sometimes right. If there are 8 of you, 7 players and the host, and all 7 of them want to be murder hobo with no consequences, power fantasy, go nuts, and that really bothers you, you have 2 choices now. You can suck it up and shut up because majority vote, or while still providing the experience that they want. So you still have to put all the effort in. Or inherently this seems like a better answer. Go find new players. This doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that you're not compatible. And a lot of the time I run into that and people blink and look at me funny. And I go, I don't understand how this is hard. If everybody who said
it's the same with any game.
Yeah, right. I don't get it. If everybody who said I want to start a band, if it was that easy, then everybody who said that would have a band. And we usually don't.
True.
You would just go down to the local where do people put band flyers? I think last time I saw one of those was in a laundromat with a little pull thingy that said looking for a drummer. And it was not informative enough. They're not looking for a drummer. They're looking for a very specific kind of drummer, and you know it.
True. No, absolutely. You're absolutely 100% correct. And the point I was making is that's the same with any game. There are people who I cannot play Risk with. I can't.
Risk?
Because they get way too intense, and I don't enjoy it.
Right.
So it's you know what? That's just. And again, different play styles means it's a different game.
Right,
and
right.
If we're playing to get,
Yeah, Risk, I can't play Risk at all. Man. But if that's fun for you, cool.
My brother and I enjoy it very, very much because him and I, we have a very similar play style when we play Risk, but other people don't like playing with us. And I get it. I totally get it. And we don't fight about it like,
I see.
Well, we're really intense. We're really, really intense, and we go hardcore on the rules and that sort of thing, and because that's the way my brother and I like to play. And since mostly we played together as children, that's the way that we kind of figured that this is how we have fun. That's fine. If anyone else doesn't, that's their deal, and we don't have to play with this. We can play charades. That's fine. But if you're gonna play Risk with us, please keep in mind, user beware.
Right. I was watching the Secrets of Blackmore documentary, and in the opening round of that, the first 20 minutes, I'm really not sure though, 1, because my sense of time is not good, and 2, because that pacing was just awful. The movie is great. You can totally watch it. The content's wonderful, but the pacing is just terrible. In the opening round of that, one of the original fighter, the very first D&D fighter ever, was talking about how in the beginning there were a couple of different hosts. There was David Wesley. I always get his first name wrong. It's not David. There was Wesley and Arneson, and the guy before Arneson, who's one of the other guys in the middle. I forget his name right now. And the idea was that whenever you went to Wesley's house, we played like this, and whenever you went to Arneson's house, we played like this, and we were kind of on a rotation. And nobody argued about it. It was kind of like when you go, he akined it to a game of poker at Tom's house. If you go play Poker Tom's house, jokers are wild. When you go play at Billy's house, they're not. And that's just the way it is.
Right.
Because it's his house and he makes the damn rules. And if
Hey,
over
he's
time,
putting up the space and the snacks, yeah.
if over time Billy's kind of an asshole and no fun to play with, we'll just play at his house less. Which then he stops talking and we switch subjects. But what he's psychologically said, another way to say that is, Billy will have to shift his behavior a little if he wants other people to play with him continuously. If he's an asshole.
Well, isn't that something that we learn at the playground in kindergarten?
Apparently not, because I have a bunch of grown-up friends who don't get it. I go, look, if you're a jerk, people will play with you less. How is this?
I'm losing you there.
How is this something that you require assistance understanding at the age of 40? I don't.
Hello? I think I'm, hold on.
I can see you, but you're not moving, and I can hear you.
Sorry
there. Hey. Yeah, I can now. I could hear the whole time. You did freeze up in this very dramatic looking pose, which was cool. That was a quality photo. I should have just snapped and sent it to you. That was cool.
You know, it's recorded. You can get that into a sticker later on.
You look like you were just like you had just solved something very important, like the cure to cancer, and you were about to lay it on us. Like
well, actually, to your point, and I think that has nothing to do with the game. It's a social skill that you learn in kindergarten when you're playing with people. If you're not fun to play with, people won't play with you.
Right. It is that simple. Right.
But also, if you are a people pleaser, you'll never play the game you want.
Not completely. No. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a balance to be struck there. And I hate to twist it back to what we were originally talking about, but then it also comes back to what type of game you prepare for the people you want. So if I get if I get a table full of players like yourself that actually frown at handouts, then the solution is I will make them for my enjoyment because that's what I do on my spare time.
Right.
But I won't bring them to the table. That's absolutely fine.
Right. See, for me, that wouldn't be the right answer, because when I make handouts, the joy I get is when I hand them over and they go,
right.
So if they're not going to do that, then I'm just not going to make them.
Well, and I have a different approach to that. Well, you see, so especially now that we're in this time of coronavirus and pandemic and we can't go out and play in person,
right?
I have begun to stockpile handouts so that I won't have to make them last minute. Yeah, that's right. So I still have the enjoyment. I still make even for the players that I have on Roll20. Even though they can have their character sheet on Roll20, they don't need a physical copy. I still make them their custom character sheet.
That's very cool.
See what I mean? Because I get the enjoyment out of doing that.
Right. See, I don't like making things as far as handouts. So the creation of the handout alone does not get me any enjoyment. That's not true. I kind of like making maps. That's fun. I draw if I'm going to make a map, it's going to be one of three things: a much bigger than it has to be world map that's going to be buried in the yard, a isometric dungeon map, which I'll draw on the computer in something like Campaign Cartographer or by hand if I have one of those squirrely notepads, because I can't do that freehand. Make it come out right anyway. And relationship maps, which I enjoy making and usually have to stop because all of a sudden the village is like a Game of Thrones and there's 10 people in it and it's too much. But this is Golden Sky Stories. You asked me earlier. It is the cutest, most adorable thing. It is Japanese as hell.
Well, yeah.
So I started going down the rabbit hole of Japanese table talks. They don't call them RPGs. They're table talks there. And I ended up with a couple. This one and all of its supplemental material and Ryutama. And they are so strange. I thought Ryutama was the weirdest system I've ever seen because everyone plays.
Never heard of it.
And um, it's adorable.
I'm gonna have to look into those. Now, again, and this is a theme that I have to harp on. Not everyone is as well versed in the variety of systems as you are. So
I tend to get that.
We do have to play catch up a little bit sometimes.
Okay, so Ryutama plays like a Studio Ghibli film, but specifically the travel parts. Like everybody plays an NPC. You play an artisan, a baker. I think the most combat heavy class you can play is inherently combative is a hunter because you have offensive skills. But everyone else just plays, an artisan or something like that. Minstrel is a cool looking class. Merchant, that sort of thing. And then you decide whether or not you're magical or offensive or utilitarian with a secondary choice that affects your character. Like nobody is really magical. You have to choose to become a mage. And even then, you're a minstrel mage, a magical baker, right? Whatever. You don't become a mage. And all of the things that make your class unique, you already have at level 1. So when you level up, everybody's leveling off of the same chart. And the idea is that, and they're all side things like, well, now here are 12 elements. Pick one. You're immune. Here are 12 weathers. Raining, muddy, whatever, snowing. Pick one. You're immune. That sort of thing. And the idea is that you do that as a team on purpose. You kind of metagame on purpose to create a more meaningful, safe travel experience. It's fascinating. And upon seeing, I forgot how I ended up here on Ryutama, but when I started reading it, I fell in love with it and went further down the Japanese tabletop rabbit hole and ended up on Golden Sky Stories, which is even weirder because Ryutama has rules for combat. They're simple, but there's more than one. There's like 6 pages. There's feinting and blocking and attacking from range and reassessing the situation. Mechanically, you can re-roll your initiative, which is good because initiative is your defense score, which is different. In Ryutama, you don't have a resting armor class. When you engage in combat, you roll initiative. The idea is if you rolled a 6 and I rolled a 10, when the enemies are attacking us, they have to meet or beat a 10 to hit me, and they have to meet or beat a 6 to hit you. The idea is right. The idea is that the slower you are reacting, the easier you are to hit. As a guy who's been in fist fights, that's accurate. Like that.
Well, that's true. But here's the thing: there's no perfect simulation for those things. The more, because even, and again, I'm going to use D&D 5e because it's the one the Ken was playing. The armor class is dependent on your dexterity bonus, so it's still baked into the reasoning of that sort of thing.
Because 5e attempts to bake reflexes into your armor class, which is how come you get a dex modifier. Exactly.
Correct.
Whereas Golden Sky Stories has no combat at all. None. It has one line. If you must attack somebody, here are the 2 values you get to choose from to use that. The attacky with your animal self one, or the attacky with your human self one. So claws or a baseball bat. Which one's it going to be? They roll whatever defense from these 2 that they like. If you win, they decide whether or not they ran away or get knocked unconscious. You both take this penalty. Done. That's it. Move on. That penalty is major, by the way. It's
discouraged to attack it. I definitely understand. Weird.
Oh man, because Japan got the Mensa Red Box in 1985. That's it. Like for a long time, they didn't get any other D&D, and they looked at it and went, "Wow, this is really cool." And then for the next 2 decades, they evolved in a completely divergent fashion. So you end up with,
as they do.
Right. I recently discovered that their favorite tabletop, per capita right now, is Call of Cthulhu. And a lot of my friends thought that was odd, and I went, "Really? It's the one with all the tentacles." Why is that weird? That seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely. Which, by the way, it's one of those systems that I believe, and oh man, I've become one of those annoying hosts that always tries it back. But isn't Call of Cthulhu one of the gaming systems that most encourages handouts because you have to actually give them the clue?
There might be. I have there's a handout that I go out of my way to do. So I'm a big fan of puzzles and riddles and traps. And I think those 3 things are one of the. I don't think there's a lot of the table you can objectively do wrong. I think everything has some flex in it somewhere.
Sure.
But I get kind of fussy about puzzles, riddles, and traps. I think there is an objectively correct way to do all three of those things. Um, it like save or die traps aren't fun unless your players specifically want them. Like unless you're doing something like Tomb of Annihilation, the old one, not the new one, because the new Tomb of Annihilation is surprisingly spongy compared to the old one. But in like Rapanathuk, there's a lot of make the save or you're dead. If your players have signed up for that, okay. My friend Des plans on like she goes to play with a friend every week, and they have the us versus them game. That's the plan. She's going to go play, and Tim's going to try and turn her into paste, and she's going to outplay him. And she knows it. That's the expectation. And if Tim comes in and he's all with the kid glove, she's going to be really disappointed. But if you haven't had that conversation, then I think there are objectively correct ways to do those three things. Then again, if you haven't had the conversation, maybe just don't do them yet. Talk about it.
Now,
that's zero as well.
I'm curious as to your approach to the correct way to do puzzles, particularly.
So puzzles, you should know if it's a puzzle, not a riddle, you should know what its purpose is up front, and you should give you the answer should be like in this building, if not in this room. Your players should be able to wander through and go find the answer. And I don't mean with a big red sign, right, with a big neon arrow that goes like this. But if it was something they picked up 20 hours ago, you ever do that in a video game? I hate that. when somebody hands me the clues to a puzzle I'm going to encounter in 20 hours. Well,
you're not gonna remember that you even have it.
Right. I'm a grown up. I ain't got time for that. Put the answer in this room, or at least a reminder, right? Something. Remind me that I have the answer. My favorite puzzles and traps, that I've ever seen were in Alundra, which is like a 30-hour PS1 game. It was packed to the gills with puzzles, riddles, and traps. They never stop coming, and they're all perfect. That video game does not get enough love. The story's super compelling. The music's really great, but for me,
Alundra wasn't that a Sega Genesis game?
Not my copy of it.
I have vague memories of it, but
there was on the Genesis there was Landstalker, which plays very similarly, and Alundra was made by the same development team. And you can tell.
I might be confusing those two, but either way.
So Alundra did a lot for me as far as puzzle and riddle design. None of the puzzles are going to make you feel stupid. Like they're never like esoteric and you're going to need like to go look it up to solve it. There isn't any of that. I loved it. All the answers are always in this room or in your brain. There just isn't an answer like a piece of a puzzle that you need to pick up and look at. It's a logic puzzle, like the potion puzzle at the end of Harry Potter. But being able to see the potions would have helped. So, and in Alundra, you can, because they're all on little tables. There's one in The Witcher 3. There's a period where there are 4 statues, and they're all a little bit different. And there's a puzzle in the middle, and you essentially have to touch each statue in the right order. And you figure out what the right order is from this block of text. And I'm a big fan of those are logic puzzles. I'm a big fan. So if you're going to give me a riddle or a puzzle where the way the thing is written on the page or the stone or whatever is a clue, if the formatting of how it's presented is a clue, and I'm real fond of those. I need to stop doing that because my players just solve them too fast. There's the other thing. If a puzzle goes on too long, if a puzzle takes more than 5 minutes, stop. There's a really fine line between your players are going, okay, I got this, I'm going to work it out, and your players going, I'm done now, and it's not solved. That one, you've gone too far. The energy of your table is gone. And
right.
You will have a hard time getting it back, not to the same level it was. This is how come pacing is a delicate thing. It's how come the old movie Psycho is scary unless you pause it every 10 minutes, because you'll ruin it. Because when Alfred Hitchcock designed that, pausing it every 10 minutes was not a thing that you could do. We didn't have cell phones. You couldn't hit spacebar on VLC and then go like this and then unpause it when you were ready. So that energy and that inertia is really powerful stuff at the table, and throwing it out for a puzzle is uncool.
And that happens a lot in gaming, not just tabletop gaming, but video games as well.
Right. Yeah. there's a line between, all right, I'm going to figure this out because I'm smart. And now I'm bashing my wall against it, my head against it. All of my energy is gone and I feel stupid. No player wants to feel stupid. If you're going to make them feel stupid, that's because you have a powerful enemy gloating over them, who they're going to kill later. You're going to give them catharsis later by making them feel stupid now, but not with a math problem, with an over impressive bad guy who they're going to love perforating like a pincushion later. Like, don't do that. But if there's a visual presentation, if the formatting of the puzzle or the riddle matters, I'll go out of my way to make that, like to give it to the players, because I don't want them to lose out on that clue. I really got to talk about my definition of riddle. The answer to the riddle has to be in the riddle, or it's not a riddle. Like what's in my pockets is not a riddle. That's a question, and it's not really the same thing.
Well, to your point, the answer is in the room.
Right. But Bilbo had no inherent way of figuring out Bilbo had no inherent way in that question of informing Gollum. Like Gollum, from what's in my pocket, Gollum had zero. There was no answer. There was no aid. There was no clue in the question. It could have been a mushroom, a key, pocket lint. Like there was no clue at all. He cheated. Right.
I did not notice that in The Hobbit, truth be said, because I read The Hobbit when I was really, really little, and I'm like, oh yeah, of course, that's a clever question. There's no way he could have gotten that. I thought that was clever, but
clever or asinine, right? Like,
well, when you're a kid and your hero does something that works, you think it's clever.
Right. As an adult, I would have accused him of cheating and refused to play. Like I would have been really mad. And I would have been screwed anyway, because that means Bilbo would have left with my magic ring. Like, he put me in a no-win situation. Screw that guy.
Well, no. I mean, like, if I were an adult and I were Gollum, I would have simply overpowered him, like, being like, no, that wasn't fun, dude. I said I was going to kill you.
Right.
And
or I would have attacked him. Right.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I beat you with my own. What do I have in my pocket? You don't have pockets. That's right, bastard. Boom.
You know? So I'm looking at the time to go help my mother move some more. She's going to come live with us today.
Oh, congrats! Okay, that's
it's gonna be rough.
a lot of physical work, literally.
Yeah, right. We're moving 3 decades worth of stuff. Because the house is a tiny bit younger than me by like a year and a half, and then my mother packed all of her previous stuff and my dad's stuff and grandparents' stuff, and people I've never even met stuff in the basement, and oh boy. Anyway, I could do this all day, but today I really can't.
No, that's likewise. I actually do work, believe it or not. I don't live off doing dungeon mastery stuff, at least not yet. But
I would love to have another Q&A on like bar games and carnival games.
So how we do this? I'm gonna set up. So this one was a bit free-form because it was just gonna be you and me, and no one else was gonna be participating. So I was happy to let it run wherever it went, no matter how giddly this became. But for the next one, I'd love to see some examples of mini games, puzzles, and so everything from bar games to puzzles and riddles, and how you actually present those.
Okay.
In a way that your players who pay to play with you,
right,
actually say like, this was worth my money and time.
Okay.
And not like, oh, well, he's a friend, we'll indulge him on whatever he's doing.
Right. Okay. Sounds good.
Because there's a difference there.
Right.
So we'll put that into the books, because I do believe that is going to be something worthwhile that more people will be interested in.
Dice poker usually goes over well for that. Think about it. You already have dice at the table, right? Like, I'm a big fan of dice poker for that. Big fan. How is Three Dragon Ante? Have you played it?
I have. I had 2 copies. My original copy of Three Dragon Ante stayed in Mexico City. I left it to a friend of mine, who was the original one, that now is worth like $800.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
And then they came out with a couple of new ones. I got the latest one that actually comes with little tokens to represent the money, so that you don't have to actually go out and buy your own little token thingy.
Cool.
But it also comes with rules to use your characters, like your D&D characters' abilities during the game. So if you have good sleight of hand, you get a certain ability that you normally can break the rules, because it's implied that your character did that with sleight of hand, that sort of thing.
Oh, nice.
So it's actually pretty nice. It is.
Yeah, that's something we should talk about later.
If you bring out Three Dragon Ante at the table, that is the only thing that's going to happen that session, because it is a long game.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, so that's just
Our
so
mid games tend to last 10 minutes, maybe less, unless like that's the point, unless it's like an Ocean 11's poker big thing, and then it's going to last hours, and people are going to get eliminated, and people are going to get upset, and there's going to be a little side fight going on over there. I'm kind of going to be like, all right, you two players who know how to.
Three Dragonante is great for that. It absolutely is. But for doing it as in session, like a piece of your session, don't bring out Three Dragonante.
Don't do it. Okay.
Don't do it.
Good to know. This has been great. Talk soon.
Talk to you soon. Have a good one.